these dreadful Barclay brothers and the owners of the Times, Mr. Murdoch, who is a zillionaire, not even a British citizen. He's an American citizen of Australian origin and has not a clue about working class people and ordinary people. You know, he makes Bill Gates look like a saint. If you hear Bill Gates' latest interview, I mean, yeah, Bill Gates is a saint compared to Murdoch, who has a ruthless streak. As far as I can tell, I mean, I've never met him, but I just think he's very badly advised. And although the Times did have some people that were against Brexit, the thrust of the Murdoch empire, including the Sun and so on, has been pro it. And that's a strategic catastrophe. I mean, the famous quote of Murdoch is, I support Brexit because when I go to Europe they don't listen to me. When I go to London they all drop what they're doing and fall on their knees. It shows you the guy's motivations. It's an arrogance. And that's not the place of wisdom. So policies coming out of that arrogance and hubris are going to lead to difficulties. Okay, fast forward where we're at then. So Scotland is inching towards independence. We have Nicola Sturgeon coming out and saying we're going to have a second referendum, whatever Boris Johnson and the Westminster government do. I mean, it is, I think, absolutely certain, as much as anything is in politics, that yes, there will be a second referendum, and it will finally be endorsed legally, probably through the Supreme Court, that the Scots have a right to self-determination and to re-examine their role in the Union. Then we have a problem, because the Whitehall, Windsor elites who secretly run the UK from behind the scenes, through the Privy Council, through their control of the monarchy, through their control of Conservative Party, and the intelligence services, have now finally woken up to the implications of Scottish independence. I've been jumping up and down over this 4 or 5 years. I wrote to Theresa May when she was Prime Minister, and I warned her immediately. I had met her, I thought she was an intelligent woman. I wrote to her on the second day after the Brexit referendum result, and I said, "Dear Prime Minister, if you implement Brexit as it is on the basis of this advisory referendum, when Scotland did not vote for it and Northern Ireland did not vote for it, and by a considerable amount, if you push it down their throats on the basis of just this majority in those that voted in England, you will have to send tanks onto the streets of Glasgow to enforce it." That's the image I used, and I stand by that. And of course she wrote back politely saying, get lost, I don't care, that's what we're doing. Okay, thank you, Theresa. That was a mistake. You should have actually thought that through at that point. But the trouble is, these top politicians, when they get into power, they're surrounded by cronies, placemen, people who lie for a living, diplomats, barristers, lawyers. Nobody tells them the truth. It's like the Emperor's New Clothes. So my letter, she obviously read it, she replied to it through her minion. It couldn't get through the lies bubble that surrounds these people. She should have realised, actually, no, Brexit is a catastrophe. And, I have to rethink this policy. I think towards the end of her premiership she began to realise, but, not enough, not in time to prevent the catastrophe, which is now unfolding. And the one thing I rewrite about my letter is, no, it's not that the Tory party is going to have to send tanks onto the streets of Glasgow. What they're going to send is information warriors. You see, the new form of warfare is cyber warfare. It's about struggling for truth. And I gave a paper at the Jane conference, in fact at the launch of the World Intellectual Forum as well. I gave a paper about the changing nature of warfare. It's now cyber warfare. It's conducted through internet warriors and so on. Every state has them, which sow disinformation and doubt and fear into the minds of their enemies, right? Like a sort of war game. And so, therefore, people involved in non-violence, like me, ahimsa, have to rethink our strategy of ahimsa. We don't want to just oppose nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and all the rest. We have to oppose information terrorism, disinformation warfare. And that's why I also suggested at that time that politicians should swear an oath of truth and veracity. And I've written a potential bill for that. I maintain that's an important part of the jigsaw puzzle of how we transform a toxic atmosphere of information warfare, which is continual civil war in all countries, that's what it leads to, into an information peace zone, whereby we can at least have confidence that that politician standing up there is telling the truth. And it would run through all, the councils, police forces, army chiefs and so on. But we don't have it. We have lies upon lies upon lies. And what the British intelligence, Windsor, Whitehall elites seem to be doing is they've said to themselves, oh, well, it doesn't matter, these Scots, we can we can take out their independence movement by planting disinformation stories. And we had the witch hunt of Alex Salmond, which, according to Craig Murray and other people I've read, was a highly engineered, orchestrated witch hunt against a man of integrity, it seems to me. I didn't agree with his policies. I didn't vote for Scottish independence. But I do absolutely believe in the right for Scottish independence to have a second referendum. What I think is, unlawful and immoral is to misuse the UK intelligence services to try and silence and prevent a second referendum happening in Scotland, and to demonise any of its leaders like Alex Salmond. And now Nicola Sturgeon, there's a whole witch hunt against her that she secretly was behind attacking Alex Salmond. I mean, that is as fanciful as actually I'm a secret CIA officer, and I've all along been pumping out propaganda for the CIA. I mean, come on, just use your logic here. No, I think that, but this is the sort of fanatical, far-fetched craziness that disinformation warfare now enables. I don't think it's going to work. I think Scotland will get its second independence referendum, and I think it will vote for independence. And I think the English, and most of my relatives, friends, and cultural background are English, right? We just have to accept that. We have to say, okay, that's it. Yeah, we were rumbled. The English were rather naughty in what we've been doing around the world. We built up a sort of fake empire. We had these Rees-Mogg types thinking it was okay to rule the world and enslave, people in Africa and take them to America. I mean, the history of the English imperial thing is something that needs a reckoning with itself. It wasn't something to celebrate. The Rees-Moggs shouldn't be jumping up and down saying, "Rah, Brexit, rah, England rules the waves." I mean, it's shocking. We need a new national anthem for a start. And we need a new poet laureate as well, someone like Amanda Gorman. So no, I think so. Anyway, I could say more about that, but I've posted some things on my Facebook, and I watch the Scottish struggle towards independence. To me, it's a bit like Imbolc. It's struggling to get out. The snowdrops are there. They're trying to burst out into the light. Scottish independence is not something to be afraid of. When I was living up there at the time, my sort of hereditary psyche, which is English largely, was afraid of Scottish independence. I thought, what are these people going on about? Westminster's an oppressive thing. I mean, I'm the guy that ran 30 meetings in Parliament in Westminster. I knew Westminster. I knew how the system worked. I didn't think it was evil. I knew there were some bad people, but that's why we were trying to make it a better place. But I've come round to realise that the bad people actually secretly do control it from behind the scenes, through the misuse of intelligence, through the misuse of the BBC and the media, through the big right-wing papers. And really, I think the Scots should be given their second referendum. And if they vote to go, then it should be a very civilised divorce. and we should let them have their full rights, and welcome them. Then I, from France, will welcome them into the family of free, independent European nations. And when I lived in Scotland for 7 years, I grew to love so many aspects of the slightly quirky Scottish character, not least their contributions intellectually to European and world intellectual history. Of course, my heroes are Duns Scotus, who I think was a better thinker than Aquinas, and Michael Scott, who was a wizard and a druid, and that's just two of them. The Scots also love Bride and Imbolc. It's a very important time in Scotland. So all my Scottish friends having their Imbolc festivities, enjoy them, my friends, and may the light return for us all. I want to just cross the Atlantic and say, yes, so we've also, all of us that are have done our homework or have some grasp of rationality in politics, have breathed a huge sigh of relief that Biden is now running the White House, and thank God that the capital freaks who were trying to destroy the democratic will of the American people, brainwashed by internet robotic propaganda, did not succeed. And he's rejoined the Paris Peace Treaty, climate change, and doing all the right things. So just to say thank you, Mr. Biden, and Kamala Harris for your wisdom, really, and getting America back into the civilized world. It's interesting, Craig Ungar's book, exposing the deep connections of Trump to the Russian state, the superpower of Russia, and alleging with lots of evidence that Trump, was groomed from 40 years ago and was a friend of Epstein, and is part of that Russian intelligence bid to put assets into place. Read the book, make up your own mind, but I think it fits. I don't think Trump was ever recruited as an official Russian agent, like a spy. No, it's much more subtle than that. I think he was groomed, he was helped out with money and loans and influence and people to kind of have a sympathetic view to Russia, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I've been to Russia, I love Russia, I have Russian friends. Where it's wrong is that this then, with his own puffed up arrogance, it created a sort of mindset of, a kind of Ivan the Terrible mentality, that you do what I say or I crush you. It was a little glimpse of what Ivan the Terrible thinking is, and Stalin had it big time. Now, I'm a historian of the Cold War. I was a specialist in Russian history with Professor Jeffrey Hosking, who did the Reith Lectures and was one of Britain's leading Russian historians, and is still going. A great man. And I was taught at the School of Slavonic and East European Studies my fundamentals of historical science. And, you've got to watch the Russians, okay? Just take it from me. They are always, by default, up to some kind of tricks. I don't mean Russian people, I don't mean the Russian intellectuals, I don't mean Russian poets and novelists. Everyone loves a Tolstoy or a Pushkin. Now, I'm talking about the guys that, used to run the KGB or used to run the Ukraina. And there's a sort of, and it's very sad, it goes back to the tragedy of Russia having been conquered by the Mongols in a way that Britain and Western Europe never was. We never learned to fight that dirty. We try and keep the old rules of chivalry going. The Russians, because they were up against such a ruthless army, the Mongols, for several hundred years, the Mongols never fought clean battles. They never behaved with chivalry. No, they would capture a town and slaughter everyone, pile the skulls up in a big pile outside, and then leave a sign on saying, you messing with me, that's what you get. So the Russians adopted, they realised to defeat them, they had to be as nasty and ruthless. And so Ivan the Terrible symbolised this. He became the most ruthless Christian leader, I think, ever. And he not only did this against the enemy, and he was responsible for Russia's expansion into Siberia. But he had to do it against his own people. Ivan the Terrible, Grozny, the fearful, the frightful, the one that brings terror, did terror against his own people. And he trained up a team of black-suited, black-clothed secret police who would go around Russia and tyrannize and terrorize anyone that spoke out against him, and would decapitate, kill, and torture. And he was a great lover of torture, because he also, in the Kremlin, had secret underground torture chambers built where he would torture his enemies if they were captured, and he wanted information off them, and either he himself or his apparatchiks would do it. And his view was that you had to torture them because he was saving their souls. He somehow, in his twisted mind, he made all this fit with Christianity, but it was a very violent, horrible, sort of dark kind of Christianity. It's like, either you join my team and we're going to heaven, or you're going to hell and I'll spit on you when I'm in heaven, kind of thing. Sort of Viking type Christianity, yeah, really black and white, horrible stuff, in which torture becomes my way of saving your soul. So I'm going to torture you until you confess that you're a horrible heretic or whatever, or that you've been conspiring against me, and then I'll let you into heaven. So anyway, perverse stuff, mind games, and I'm afraid the Russians never fully grew out of that. And I think that, the kind of Trump years are a sort of Ivan the Terrible, revenge type torture thing done to the American psyche, and people will need deprogramming from it. We have to wake up out of this nightmare. It's very interesting, actually, just to let you into a little side here, that I've run, among many other things, I've published and authored the Interfaith Peace Treaty, which is the only such thing. The idea which came to me in Scotland at the Castle of the Muses is that all the faiths sign up to this peace treaty and promise not to kill and attack and hate other religions. That we just start with what we've got, the periodic table. We work towards a mutual understanding. Our theologians should be peace-oriented, working on accommodation of each other's faiths. So yeah, you stay a Jew, you a Muslim, you a Christian, you a pagan, you a Wiccan, you a Druid, a Hindu, a Buddhist. But let's have a common denominator where we can all ascribe to, which should be peace, non-violence, truth, justice, the fundamentals. Anyway, it's a simple text, it's great, people have signed it, you're welcome to sign it, it's got its own website. The only guy that refused to sign it was, and was rude about it, was a Russian Orthodox guy from St Petersburg, some bishop type, who I managed to write to him in Russian with an assistant. And he wrote back a really rude letter saying, I'm not signing this. I'm not going to accept that our great Russian Orthodox tradition has got anything in common with any of these other religions. We alone are the truth. We are the one light, the one way. They're all damned heretics going to hell. Now, I'm not only not going to sign this, I utterly and totally oppose the very thinking that's behind it. Wow. So anyway, that blast of cold, icy air came down from St Petersburg, and I thought, yeah, thank you, Ivan the Terrible. That's the thinking, that's the mentality. And there are some Russians that think like that. I mean, mostly the Anglo-Saxon Anglican types grew out of that about 400 years ago. We had an enlightenment. Mostly the Catholics grew out of that, and with Vatican II we grew out of it completely. Now we accept the plurality of paths to truth, like Karl Rahner, Thomas Merton, Hans Kung, and all the great intellectuals of Catholicism have said, and had all along. I mean, true Catholicism means universality, and Tomberg, the great Hermetic Catholic thinker who wrote the wonderful commentaries on the Tarot, he represents that quintessential French Gnostic Hermetic Catholicism, which is the same as Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, the great French Catholic intellectual. So these people are way, way more mature than that sort of angry, like, no, we're the only ones type attitude, which the Russians have. So anyway, the healing is needed. And this is where intellectuals come in. Unfortunately, we have on the World Intellectual Forum a very important professor of global philosophy in Russia, Professor Chumakov, who sees things from a truly global perspective. And other Russian intellectuals, they have the antidote to the narcissistic nastiness of the kind of racist right wing which exists in Russia. And I don't think Putin actually, I think he's wiser than that. And I strongly hope that the good angels of Russian culture and civilization win out. Like all cultures, there's a civil war going on, and he's having problems with balancing everything. But if he authorized specific intelligence interference in American democracy, and if he authorized specific intelligence interference in British Brexit referendums, then I think that's very naughty, and he should, resign, apologise, step down, and be exposed. And if not, then whoever did in his circle, entourage, should be the same. And that's what our intelligence people should be doing, is exposing in order to get peace. The only point of an intelligence service is actually to make peace. I mean, my hero, John Dee, he was regarded as the founder of British intelligence by Walsingham and so on. Well, his vision was a world of peace. He only wanted the British Empire if it was helpful to get peace. And he wanted the excesses of Catholic, nonsense torturers and so on, the Inquisition types, to go to bed, and the extreme Protestants likewise, who were just as bad. He wanted a world of peace. And that's the only reason to have intelligence, is to spot wars coming up ahead and to prevent them happening. So I think a preemptive, preventative, observatory of human rights desecrations and so on would be a peace intelligence service. And I think the European Union should get one. And the British should play its role when England, Scotland, Ireland, probably as separate nations, rejoin, as I believe will happen. And then we can all work together on peace and the prevention of future wars. Anyone with a brain, I think, could have foreseen that the Brexit result was going to lead to war and catastrophe, as I wrote to Theresa May. Okay, so that's a few thoughts. And I want to move on now back to my purely more metaphysical religious studies side. I've been working, as you know, on this book on religious mathematics, which is going really well. It's really intense and difficult and challenging, but I like a good challenge, right? And I've been really enjoying it because it's an intellectual struggle, So this week I've worked on the chapters on celibacy, which is absolutely fascinating. Many, many religions say that to be really serious about spirituality, you have to be celibate, both men and women. You can't be a Catholic priest unless you're celibate, for instance, and you can't be a Buddhist monk in most orders, or a Jain, and so on. So celibacy is really important. I've come across a very interesting Protestant Lutheran called Johann Gichtel, who was a theosophist in the 18th century, died, I think, in 1709, and who was an interpreter of Jacob Boehme. A great, great man. I mean, Boehme was a genius who inspired Hegel. And Gichtel applied his works. He wrote a book called Theosophia Practica. And his life was one continual spiritual struggle between good and evil. And he describes in his prayer life, combating demons and so on. Amazing stuff. And he felt celibacy was very, very important because it strengthens the spiritual warrior so that you're not tempted by the sort of lusts and jealousies and so on that come up when you get involved sexually. I think that celibacy is very important for us, for some people, for a time. I personally had a period of 4 years. I went through my brahmacharya years deliberately. I eschewed all sexual relations, and it was a period of profound intellectual adventures. I eventually decided, well, if everyone that's spiritual became celibate, then, we wouldn't be having children. We wouldn't take forward the very things that are making us spiritual. So I decided deliberately that, rationally, that actually, let's say, modified celibacy is more appropriate for an intellectual. And that remains my position. I think that sexuality is a very powerful, amazing energy, but it should only be engaged in the right wisdom affair type context when both parties are pledged to a spiritual outcome of enlightenment. In the tantric system, that's the point of sexuality, is mutual co-enlightenment. And that's what the alchemical tradition is about. That's what the Gnostic traditions are about. And that's what I think Christ and Mary Magdalene were about. But that's pure love. That's something different. Anyway, I went into all this in great detail. The question of celibacy and the numbers and the mathematics of it. And it's very interesting. Then I've been working on ahimsa, which is another ethical principle, non-violence, ahimsa, which is very, very important in world religions. And I worked on the religious maths of ahimsa. At what point is, what is ahimsa? How do we know? Obviously Gandhi, Martin Luther King, these great teachers of non-violence have applied it in our lifetimes, and Tolstoy and so on, and Thomas Merton. Well, what is it? So I've been working on the religious maths of that. One thing that's interesting is that, you see, I ran the School of Nonviolence for the Gandhi Foundation, and then subsequently under my institute's hat, since it was set up in about 1993. I called my youngest daughter Shanti because her mother and I met and courted through that work of the School of Nonviolence. Shanti, who's now doing a PhD at Cambridge, was the fruit of our love of ahimsa. Well, the School of Nonviolence is being renamed the School of Ahimsa because, as Gandhi pointed out, the meaning of the word in Sanskrit, ahimsa, is much deeper and more nuanced than nonviolence. Ahimsa is one of the virtues that any sage has to swear to if you want to study the highest wisdom. So if you want to study yoga and become a pupil of a rishi in India, you have to swear ahimsa. But you also have to swear satya, truth, and non-possessiveness, non-grasping, non-ego. It's the same in Jainism. Ahimsa is one of the vows you take, but you also take the other vows that come with it, most important being truthfulness. And the same in Buddhism. Ahimsa is one of the things you swear to as a Buddhist, but it's only one. You have to swear to truthfulness and all the others, and non-grasping, non-possessiveness, including non-possessiveness of the self. I mean, Buddha's genius in saying the not-self thing was realizing that most people, it's our ego that we hold on to and cling to that is the cause of the suffering cycles and the revenge cycles and the wars and so on. So even be prepared to let yourself go. That's the ultimate sacrifice of ego giving up itself, whereupon it's given back the universe. That's the beauty. That's what people discover under ayahuasca or whatever, when they dissolve their ego into the universe and they come back as the universe itself. Well, that's the higher mysteries of these Gnostic paths. And so ahimsa, the School of Ahimsa, studies all this stuff. This is really, really important. I've discovered an amazing Jain philosopher who lived in the 1600s, who worked out there are 32 types of intellectual virtue, and ahimsa is just one of them. The others is non-judgmentalism, many-sidedness of view, and akantvada, and so on. So that's the sort of thing the School of Ahimsa is looking into. What are those 32 intellectual virtues that Jain sage analysed, and how do we cultivate them in not just ourselves but in everybody That's how we get a world of peace and non-violence. Do we all have to become celibate for that? Well, that's kind of not really workable, because then the planet, that's one solution, just end the experiment of human beings. But no, I think men and women can work together to a sacred sexuality, whereby we sublimate our eros towards the agape of mutual co-enlightenment. And we can practice those 32 intellectual virtues together, not just in isolation. Discuss. Okay, so then, and more recently, I've been working on a chapter on games and sports and games, because, man is a game-playing creature. Homo ludens, we've been described by some philosophers. We love playing games. As kids, that's all we do. We play. We go in the park and play games. That's what I did as a kid. Or you play board games, or you make setups. Everything is a game. Let's pretend. I'll be, and you be. That's what kids do. Well, adults are doing the same. We maybe become an actor and we join the theatre and we do plays, or we play sports. And life is a game. Wittgenstein said that all religions are just language games where you learn the rules of that particular language. And there's an element of let's pretend in all religions. The priests dress up in costumes, they do rituals, they pretend that the north is earth, the east is air. It's a way of seeing. It's a visualization game. And in all the mystery traditions, that's what it was. That's what you get when you do the mysteries of Eleusis. I've been there. The place seemed to be closed down. It was all ruins, but I did them myself in my imagination and went down into the underworld. And that's what religion is about. It's about imagination. That's what Muhammad was doing on his night journey to Jerusalem. He was a great game player. Islam is a superb game. Rumi as well was a great game player. He said it's the game of love, that all parts of the universe are looking for themselves to find and fall in love with, and then to fall at the feet of the beloved, who is pure love, the absolute, who is the master player of the master game, to use Hermann Hesse's glass bead game analogy. And somebody ought to write a sequel to that, by the way. Okay, so look, that's what I've been working on games. And now we have game theory, which is a developed branch of maths, but it hasn't fully been applied to religious studies yet. I'm arguing in my book that religious mathematics should look at game theory again and see if it can't help solve the conflicts between religions, because religions are very prone to taking the games too seriously. So you get, extreme evangelical pro-Trump people wanting to drop bombs on Taliban people, and it's just a game that's got out of hand, all this. And whoever assassinated Kennedy was just taking the game too far. Whoever faked the 9/11 attacks and engineered the layers of deceit, well, they weren't playing fair. They weren't playing by the rules. Whoever stacked the mendacity campaign that led to Brexit, again, they weren't playing by the right rules. So I think game theory has a lot to say towards peace. And some of my doctoral colleagues, my academic friends in conflict research, have been working with game theory, Hugh Mile and people, for a long time. It's time we applied it to religious game playing and religious wars. Right, so that's a little summary of what I've been up to this last week. I hope the games of life are going well for you. And don't forget, life is a game. We should enjoy it. Hinduism wisely says that God creates the world out of this sense of love, of leela, of game playing. This is, and the best game of